Everything changes the moment you turn the knob.
They say life can change in a heartbeat, but that's BS. Life doesn't change in a heartbeat. It shatters in the time it takes to turn a doorknob. And let me tell you, I should have seen the warning signs flashing like neon billboards. That Friday afternoon started out like something from a magazine cover. I'm talking picture-perfect success story material. I just wrapped up the Henderson case early, got that client off on a technicality that would have made any defense attorney proud, and I was riding high on victory. The sun was streaming through my corner office windows in downtown Chicago, casting those golden rays that make you feel invincible. I had my weekend mapped out with military precision. Flight tickets to Athens tucked safely in my briefcase, the honeymoon suite at that boutique hotel overlooking the Mediterranean that Emma had bookmarked on her laptop about 50 times, and the centerpiece, that damn necklace. 3 months' salary sitting in a velvet box in my jacket pocket, delicate white gold with a diamond pendant that caught light like captured fire. She'd stood in front of that jewelry store window for 20 minutes last month, her breath fogging the glass as she pressed her nose against it like some kid at a candy shop. "It's gorgeous," she'd whispered, and I'd filed that moment away immediately. Our 6th anniversary deserved something extraordinary. She deserved something extraordinary. Or so I believed at the time. I left the office at 2:30, which was practically unheard of in my profession. My secretary, Mrs. Patterson, actually looked worried when I told her to reschedule Monday's appointments. "Everything okay, Mr. Anderson?" she asked, peering over those reading glasses that made her look like a concerned librarian. I just grinned and told her I was surprising my wife. The word wife tasted sweet back then. Funny how quickly that can sour. The drive home through downtown was smooth sailing. Traffic was unusually light for a Friday, and I had classic rock cranked up, singing along like I didn't have a care in the world. I even stopped at that upscale wine shop on State Street and grabbed a bottle of that expensive French champagne Emma loved, the one that cost more than most people's weekly paycheck. Money wasn't an issue when it came to her happiness. It never had been. Our townhouse looked perfect as I pulled into the driveway. The lawn was immaculate thanks to the landscaping service I paid good money for, and the fall flowers Emma had planted were still blooming in the window boxes. Everything appeared exactly as it should in our picture-perfect existence. I remember thinking about how fortunate I was as I walked up those front steps, keys jangling in my hand, already imagining the expression on her face when I surprised her with the Athens trip. That's when my perfect world went straight to hell. The front door wasn't locked. That should have been my first red flag, but I was too caught up in romantic fantasies to pay attention. Emma always locked the door, always. It was practically sacred ritual with her after that break-in scare we'd had 3 years ago. But there I was, turning the handle and stepping into our foyer like some oblivious fool in a bad movie. The shoes hit me first. Men's dress shoes, probably size 11, Italian leather, expensive looking. Not mine, definitely not mine. They were positioned by the door like they belonged there, like some other man had every right to make himself comfortable in my house. My heart started doing this irregular rhythm, but I convinced myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe it was Richard, my law partner. Maybe he'd stop by to discuss a case. But Richard wore sneakers exclusively. Then I noticed the shirt, navy blue button-down, hanging off the banister like some twisted breadcrumb trail. My mouth went dry as desert sand. Next came a bra, black lace, one I'd purchased for Emma last Valentine's Day. It was draped over the bottom step like it had been tossed carelessly, and seeing it there in that context made my stomach twist into knots. The jeans came next. Women's jeans, Emma's jeans, the ones that hugged her curves perfectly, the ones I loved seeing her wear. They were crumpled on the 4th step. That's when the reality of what I was witnessing finally penetrated my denial. This wasn't some innocent scenario. This was a trail, a goddamn trail leading upstairs to my bedroom. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds, staring up those stairs like they led to the gates of hell. Part of me wanted to charge up there, burst through the bedroom door, and confront whatever nightmare was waiting. But another part, the attorney part, the strategic part, told me to slow down, to think, to be smart about this. I walked into the den, my legs feeling like they were made of lead, and grabbed my old leather recliner. That chair had belonged to my grandfather, passed down through 3 generations of Anderson men. It was heavy as hell, but adrenaline is powerful. I dragged it across the hardwood floor, the legs scraping and squealing like fingernails on chalkboard, and positioned it at the bottom of the staircase. I settled into that old recliner, leather creaking under my weight, and stared up at the ceiling. I could hear them now. Voices, laughter, the sound of my marriage dying one giggle at a time. You'd think a man discovering his wife's infidelity would lose control, right? Start screaming, throwing objects, maybe punch holes in walls like some suburban rage monster. But here's the thing about betrayal. Real betrayal, the kind that cuts to your core, it doesn't make you crazy. It makes you cold. Ice cold. Sitting in that chair, listening to the sounds of my marriage being flushed down the toilet upstairs, I felt something settle over me that was more frightening than rage. I felt calm. Dead calm. The kind of calm that comes before hurricanes hit, when the air gets thick and everything goes still. I shifted my weight in the chair, old leather groaning beneath me, and that's when I noticed the coffee table. Our beautiful glass coffee table that Emma had spent 3 weeks selecting, the one that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Sitting on top of it like they owned the place were his belongings. A brown leather wallet, expensive looking, the kind that screams money, and next to it a cell phone in one of those premium cases. This son of a witch had been here before. That realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't some spontaneous moment, some oops, we got carried away situation that Emma might try to sell me later. No, this fool was comfortable enough in my house to casually toss his personal items around like he lived here, like he belonged here, like he had every right to make himself at home while he screwed my wife in the bed I paid for. The phone was face up, and I could see notifications lighting up the screen every few minutes, text messages, missed calls, the usual digital noise that follows us around. But one name kept appearing repeatedly: home. Someone was trying to reach this piece of garbage, and they were getting increasingly insistent. I reached over and picked up the phone, surprised by how steady my hands were. The screen was locked, but iPhones show just enough to be dangerous. I could see partial messages, timestamps, missed call notifications, and that contact name, home, listed as the primary emergency contact, his wife. This fool had a wife. That realization hit me like a freight train loaded with irony. Here I was, sitting in my house, waiting to confront my cheating wife and her lover, and it turns out the other man was married too. Some poor woman was probably wondering why her husband wasn't answering his phone, maybe preparing dinner, maybe helping kids with homework, completely unaware that her world was about to implode just like mine. I stared at that phone, watching it illuminate with another missed call from home. The preview showed part of a text message. "Where are you? Kids are asking." That was all I could see, but it was enough. More than enough. Before I could second-guess myself, I answered the next call. The phone barely rang once before a woman's voice came through, sharp and irritated. "Marcus, where the hell have you been? I've been calling for 2 hours." Marcus. So that was his name. It sounded like the kind of name that belonged to some entitled a-hole from the country club, the type who wore boat shoes without socks and thought he was God's gift to womankind. "Ma'am?" I said, keeping my voice level and professional. Years of courtroom experience had taught me how to stay calm under pressure. "This isn't Marcus." There was a pause, a long, loaded pause that stretched between us like a tightrope. "Who is this?" Her voice had changed. Gone was the irritation, replaced by something sharper, suspicion, fear, maybe. "My name is James Anderson," I said, each word deliberate and clear. "And I'm sitting in my living room holding your husband's phone." Another pause. I could hear her breathing, could practically feel her mind racing, trying to process what I just told her. "Where's Marcus?" she asked, and her voice had gotten smaller, quieter, like she already knew the answer but needed to hear it anyway. "Upstairs," I said, "in my bedroom, with my wife." The silence that followed was deafening. It stretched on so long I thought she might have hung up. But then I heard something that surprised me. She didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She didn't start screaming or demanding explanations. Instead, she laughed. It was a bitter, hollow sound that had nothing to do with humor and everything to do with recognition. "Son of a witch," she whispered, and I could hear years of suspicion and doubt crystallizing into certainty in those 3 words. "Ma'am, I'm sorry you had to find out this way," I said, and I meant it. Whatever Marcus had done to his marriage, however many lies he'd told this woman, she didn't deserve to discover the truth from a stranger holding her husband's phone. "Linda," she said. "My name is Linda, and don't apologize. I've been waiting for this call for 3 years. 3 years. Jesus Christ. How long had Marcus been pulling this crap? How many other wives were there? How many other families had this fool torn apart with his wandering ways and expensive Italian shoes? "What are you going to do?" Linda asked, and there was something in her voice that made me sit up straighter. It wasn't fear. It wasn't pleading. It was something else entirely. "I haven't decided yet," I said, which was the truth. "Well, when you figure it out," Linda said, her voice getting harder with each word, "you tell that worthless piece of crap not to bother coming home. Tell him I'll be waiting with divorce papers and a restraining order." The line went dead, leaving me alone with the sound of my own breathing and the muffled voices still drifting down from upstairs. I set the phone back on the coffee table right where I'd found it and settled back into my chair. Marcus's wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, had just given me something I hadn't expected. Validation. Not that I needed anyone's permission to handle my own business, but knowing that Linda was on my side, that she was ready to burn Marcus's world down just as completely as he'd burned mine, well, that changed things. That made this whole situation a lot more interesting. The sounds from upstairs had gotten louder over the past few minutes. Not just voices anymore, but movement, footsteps, the creak of floorboards that I knew by heart, the loose one near the dresser, the squeaky spot by the bathroom door. These were the intimate sounds of my own house being violated, and each one felt like a needle sliding under my skin. Then I heard something that made my blood run cold. Laughter. Giggles, actually. High-pitched, breathless giggles that I recognized immediately as Emma's. The same laugh she used to make when I'd surprise her with flowers or tell her a stupid joke. The same laugh that used to make my chest tighten with love was now making something else tighten, my resolve. But I wasn't some hothead. I wasn't going to go off half-cocked like some character in a bad action movie. I was James Anderson, criminal defense attorney, master of self-control and calculated decisions. So I did what any rational man would do in this situation. I waited. The footsteps upstairs stopped for just a second. Complete silence. Even the house itself seemed to be holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. It was the kind of silence that comes right before earthquakes, when all the animals go quiet and the air gets thick with electricity. I could feel it pressing against my eardrums like I was underwater. Then the floorboards creaked again, and I heard them coming down the stairs. Emma appeared first, and Jesus Christ, she looked exactly like what she was. A woman who'd just been thoroughly engaged with someone who wasn't her husband. Her dark hair was tousled in that way that had nothing to do with sleep and everything to do with passion. She was wearing that silk robe I'd bought her for Christmas, the emerald green one that brought out her eyes. It was hanging open just enough to be scandalous, and her skin had that flushed glow that I used to love seeing on lazy Sunday mornings. But when her eyes met mine, when she saw me sitting there in that chair, everything about her changed. The satisfied smile vanished. The lazy post-encounter contentment evaporated like steam. Her green eyes went wide with something that was part shock, part fear, and part guilt so thick you could cut it with a knife. "James," she whispered, and my name coming out of her mouth sounded like a prayer or a curse. Maybe both. Her hand went to her throat, fingers finding the pulse point there, like she was checking to make sure her heart was still beating. That's when Marcus stumbled into view behind her, and I got my first good look at the son of a witch who'd been screwing my wife. He was exactly what I'd expected. Mid-30s, probably worked out religiously, the kind of guy who thought his abs gave him the right to take whatever he wanted. His chest was bare, revealing one of those carefully sculpted physiques that screamed, "I spend more time at the gym than with my family." His dark hair was messed up in that same telling way as Emma's, and he had that smug, satisfied expression that some men get after they think they've conquered something. At least he had that expression until he saw me sitting there. I watched the color drain from his face like someone had pulled a plug. It was actually fascinating from a psychological standpoint, the way his arrogant smirk melted into confusion, then understanding, then pure, undiluted terror. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, and I could practically see his brain trying to process the situation he'd just walked into. "James, wait." Emma's voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through the silence like a scream. She took a step toward me, one hand extended like she was approaching a wild animal, which, come to think of it, wasn't far from the truth. I didn't say anything, didn't move. Just sat there, staring at them both, taking in every detail of this moment that would be burned into my memory forever. The way Emma's robe had slipped off one shoulder, the way Marcus's hands were trembling at his sides, the way they both looked like they'd rather be anywhere else in the world. Marcus finally found his voice, though it came out as more of a croak than actual speech. "Look, man, I can explain." "No," I said, my voice perfectly calm and conversational. "You can't." That's when I stood up, and both of them took an involuntary step backward. Not because I was threatening them, I wasn't, but because sometimes calm is more terrifying than rage. "How long?" I asked, looking directly at Emma. She opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again, like she was practicing verbal gymnastics. When she finally found her voice, it came out as barely a whisper. "James, I can explain." "I didn't ask for an explanation," I cut her off. "I asked how long. How long have you been screwing this piece of crap in our bed?" The words hung in the air between us like a physical thing, ugly and sharp-edged. Emma flinched like I'd slapped her. 6 months, she whispered, and those 2 words hit me harder than any physical blow could have. 6 months, half a year. That meant this had been going on during my birthday, during our trip to Napa Valley, during all those nights when she'd claimed she was working late or out with girlfriends. 6 months of lies, 6 months of deception, 6 months of me being the biggest fool in Chicago. "Every business trip?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She nodded, tears starting to stream down her cheeks, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of someone who'd gotten caught, someone who was sorry about the consequences, but not about the actions that led to them. "Where?" I continued. "Hotels, mostly." Marcus spoke up for the first time since his failed attempt at explanation, his voice shaky but trying to sound reasonable, like we were discussing the weather instead of the systematic destruction of my marriage. "Sometimes my place. When Linda was—" "I wasn't talking to you," I said, not even looking in his direction. "In fact, the only time I want to hear your voice is if you're bleeding out and need to confess your sins." Marcus's mouth snapped shut so fast I heard his teeth click together. I turned back to Emma, studying her face like I was seeing it for the first time. And, in a way, I was. The woman I'd married, the woman I'd loved for 7 years, was a stranger wearing a familiar mask. "Did you use protection?" I asked, and I watched her face cycle through confusion, embarrassment, and something that might have been shame. "What?" she stammered. "It's not a complicated question, Emma. When you were screwing this married piece of garbage, did you at least have the courtesy to use protection? Or were you trying to give me some kind of parting gift?" Her face went pale, then flushed red, then pale again. "I was on the pill," she said quietly. I laughed, actually laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because the alternative was screaming, and I was trying to maintain some dignity in the situation. "Oh, how thoughtful," I said, letting the sarcasm drip from every word. "So considerate. You were planning to keep screwing around indefinitely, but at least you didn't want to complicate things with an inconvenient pregnancy. Very practical, very modern." "James, please," she sobbed. "Please what? Please forgive you. Please pretend this never happened. Please pack up and leave so you two lovebirds can continue your affair without the messy complications of a husband getting in the way." She was sobbing now. Ugly crying that made her mascara run down her cheeks in black streaks. But I felt nothing. No sympathy, no urge to comfort her, no desire to make her feel better. If anything, I felt disgusted that I'd ever been attracted to someone so weak, so selfish, so fundamentally dishonest. I looked at Marcus, who was still trying to make himself invisible. "How many others?" I asked. He looked confused, like the question was somehow unexpected. "What? How many other wives have you screwed? How many other marriages have you destroyed? Because a guy like you doesn't just wake up one day and decide to start cheating. This is a pattern, a lifestyle. So I want to know exactly how much of a piece of crap I'm dealing with." Marcus's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He looked like he was trying to do complex math in his head, which was probably exactly what he was doing. "Can't remember?" I asked conversationally. "That many, huh?" I turned back to Emma, who was watching this exchange with growing horror, like she was finally understanding what kind of man she'd thrown her marriage away for. "One more question," I said to her. "Were you planning to leave me?" The question hit her like a physical blow. She actually staggered backward. "What? No, I never—" "Because that would have been the honest thing to do," I continued. "If you were so unhappy, so unfulfilled, so desperate for something I couldn't provide, the decent thing would have been to ask for a divorce before you started spreading your legs for married men." "That's horrible," she whispered. What's horrible is lying to your husband's face for 6 months while you screw another woman's husband in the bed he pays for, I replied. What's horrible is destroying multiple families because you're too selfish and cowardly to deal with your problems honestly. The fight went out of her then. I could actually see it happen, like someone had unplugged her batteries. Her shoulders sagged, her head dropped, and she slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor. "I still love you," she whispered, and those 4 words made me angrier than anything else she could have said. That's when I laughed again, really laughed this time. Deep belly laughs that echoed off the walls. I laughed until my sides hurt, until tears streamed down my cheeks, until both Emma and Marcus were staring at me like I completely lost my mind. "You love me," I said when I could finally speak again. "That's rich. That's absolutely damn rich. You love me so much that you've been screwing another man for 6 months. You love me so much that you brought him into our home, into our bed, on the day I was planning to surprise you with a trip to Athens for our anniversary. You love me so much that you're willing to destroy everything we've built together for cheap thrills with a serial cheater." I stood up then, looking down at both of them. "You know what, Emma? I don't think you understand what love actually means. Because love, real love, doesn't do this. Real love doesn't betray. Real love doesn't lie. Real love doesn't turn your entire life into a damn joke." I walked over to where Marcus's phone had been sitting and picked it up. "Call your wife," I said, holding it out to him. "Tell her where you are. Tell her what you've been doing. Tell her exactly what kind of man she married." Marcus stared at me like I just offered him a live grenade. "Look, man, I'm not asking for your opinion," I cut him off. "I'm telling you what's going to happen. You're going to call Linda, and you're going to tell her the truth. All of it. She already knows," he stammered. "You already told her. She knows you're here. She knows you're screwing my wife. But she doesn't know the details, does she? She doesn't know that you've been doing this for 6 months. She doesn't know that this isn't the first marriage you've helped destroy." Marcus's hands were shaking as he took the phone. It took him 3 tries to find Linda's number in his contacts, and I could see sweat beading on his forehead. "I can't," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then I will," I said, taking the phone back. "And I'll be sure to mention how you begged me not to call, how you tried to run away from the consequences of your actions, how you're exactly the kind of coward who destroys families and then hides when it's time to face the music." That got him moving. With trembling fingers, he dialed the number. "Linda?" His voice cracked like a teenager's. "It's me. I'm at James Anderson's house. Yes, the man who called you. No, I can't come home right now because I've been having an affair with his wife." I could hear Linda's voice through the phone, sharp and angry, but I couldn't make out the words. 6 months, Marcus continued, and I could see tears streaming down his face now. "Yes, multiple times. Hotels, mostly. Sometimes our house when you were at your sister's." More angry words from Linda. I know I did. The kids, yes, I understand. I'll find somewhere else to stay." He hung up and handed me back the phone with shaking hands. "There," I said. "Was that so hard?" The next few hours were a blur of lawyers and documents and very civil, very legal destruction. I didn't need to threaten anyone or get violent. I just needed to be thorough. Emma moved out that weekend. The prenup I'd insisted on held up perfectly. She got exactly what she'd brought into the marriage, and not a penny more. 7 years of my life gone, but at least she wouldn't profit from the wreckage. Marcus's situation was more complicated and infinitely more satisfying. It turned out Linda worked in HR at his company, and she'd been documenting his behavior for years. Not just the affairs, which were numerous, but the sexual maltreatment complaints, the misuse of company resources, the pattern of carnivory behavior that the corporate lawyers had been quietly settling to avoid publicity. When Linda brought all of that documentation to my law firm, we had enough ammunition to destroy Marcus's career completely. His company terminated him immediately for violation of his morality clause. No severance, no benefits, no references. Linda got full custody of the kids and alimony that reflected Marcus's previous earning potential, not his current unemployment status. The house in Wilmette? Gone. The country club membership? Canceled. The respect of his peers? Evaporated. Within 6 months, Marcus went from corporate vice president to selling insurance out of a strip mall office, trying to rebuild his life from scratch while paying alimony and child support that consumed most of his income. But here's the beautiful part. It was all perfectly legal. No vigilante justice, no threats, no violence, just systematic consequences delivered through proper channels. Marcus had built his life on lies and exploitation, assuming his actions wouldn't have repercussions. Wrong assumption. 3 years later, I'm sitting on a terrace in Santorini, the same place Emma and I were supposed to celebrate our anniversary. And I've never been happier. The villa costs more per week than most people earn in a month. But destroying Marcus's life turned out to be surprisingly profitable. The 7-figure settlement from his company was just the beginning. Linda passed the bar exam last year. She's Linda Morrison again, dropped the Marcus name the day her divorce was finalized. At 38, she juggled law school with single motherhood, driven by the kind of determination that was beautiful to witness. She heads our family law division now, fierce and focused, protecting other women from men like her ex-husband. We're colleagues. Maybe something more someday, but there's no rush. We understand each other in ways that people who haven't been through betrayal can't comprehend. The practice is thriving. Taking down corporate carnivores makes for excellent advertising. Richard and I hired 3 associates last year and are considering a second office. Marcus? Last I heard, he's selling used cars somewhere outside St. Louis. The mighty have fallen hard. Between wrongful termination lawsuits, workplace settlements, and divorce proceedings, he lost everything. House, career, respect. His kids live with Linda full-time. He gets every other weekend if he can afford the gas money from Missouri. Emma moved to California after our divorce. The prenup held. She got what she brought to the marriage, nothing more. I rarely think about her now. Where love and anger once lived, there's just emptiness. Not bitter, not sad, just nothing. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about rebuilding yourself so completely that they become irrelevant footnotes in your success story. Emma's betrayal was devastating at the time, but it pushed me toward a better life I never would have found otherwise. The man who discovered that affair was broken and angry. The man I am now is grateful it happened because it led me exactly where I needed to be. If you want to hear about my therapy, absolutely went. Spent 2 years working through the anger and trust issues with a professional. Best money I ever spent. The goal isn't to get over it quickly, it's to process it healthily and learn what you actually want moving forward. Also, to be clear, I never wanted Marcus to suffer just for the sake of suffering. I wanted him to face appropriate consequences for his actions. There's a difference between justice and revenge. Justice rebuilds, revenge just destroys. And I chose rebuilding every time.